Hello, my name is Bruce Aitchison from Happiness is Egg-Shaped. Welcome to the Happiness is podcast, where I have the great pleasure to speak to good people. And today we have one of the best. I am so pleased he agreed to say yes to this, because he is far, far away, far out east. He is a man who I owe a huge amount to, because if anyone asks me about Hong Kong, I say the same thing back. For me, it was a land of opportunity, but opportunity only comes when people give it to you. And this man was very, very kind to me amongst a whole load of other people. But this guy stands out head and shoulders above many. He's a native from Scotland, went out to Hong Kong and has just progressed and climbed the ladder and is now at the summit, where he is in charge of all kinds of important stuff. He is humble and very modest, so it will be a bit of a job to get him to admit how wonderful he really is, but that's what I'm going to try and do. He is the CEO of the Hong Kong Rugby Football Union, and I am absolutely delighted to say he's a mate of mine, and his name is Robbie McRobbie. Robbie, welcome to the pod. How on earth are you?
H.E., absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.
I'm so happy, and you're probably going to be the only person on here that will call me H.E. as well, so that's even better, just makes it even more unique. So Hong Kong at the moment, you are planning for a sevens in November rather than the end of March, start of April. How are things looking?
Well, first of all, Gung Hei Fat Choi, San Nin Fai Lok, San Tai Gin Hong. It's the first day of Chinese New Year here, so very best wishes, H.E., for a very happy, healthy and prosperous year of the ox.
And now you're just showing off with all your local lingo. You are just the master.
So yes, the sevens, we sadly last year were unable to actually get sevens hosted. It's been running since 1976. I'm the first CEO who failed to actually manage to put it on, which is a bit of a blow, really. And in the process, I also recorded the biggest deficit we've ever had. But
I don't think that's you, though.
The buck stopped somewhere. You just said I was in charge. So anyway, the good news is we have a date in November, which is fantastic. We're all very much looking forward to that. And so that will be part of the rejig 2021 Sevens series. And then we should be back in our normal slot in April 2022 when the 22-23 series gets going. So, yeah, it'll be 2.5 years, which is a long time between drinks by the time we actually host the sevens. But yeah, it should be great. I mean, by then, fingers crossed, there'll have been an Olympics. We'll have a new men's and women Olympic champions. We'll be holding, it'll be the first time that we've had both the men's and the women's core series held in Hong Kong over the same weekend. So yeah, lots to look forward to.
That is going to be some weekend. If everybody's allowed back, I fear for how that's going to go.
Well, I'm even more excited, H.E., on the basis that you've now invited Deacon Blue to take part, and Super Ali McCoy.
Super Ali, what a legend. Yes, Deacon Blue and Ali McCoy have become quite close personal friends of mine, Robbie, don't you know?
I have to say, I very much enjoyed I watched that Doddy cast, which was brilliant, and yeah, I've been catching a lot of stuff you've been doing. So fantastic, all the support you've given the My Name's Doddy Foundation over not just the last month, but yeah, it's been very enjoyable when there's not been a huge amount of entertainment apart from Netflix. H.E.,
yeah,
you've been filling the gap, mate.
Oh well, there's quite a lot of it to fill a gap, so it's that's easily done. I tell you though, the best bit about it, when we first started talking about it, it was to achieve three things. One was to get more people to sign up, which then means more money raised. So those were the first two. But the third one, which was the one I could actually have any kind of impact on, was can we have some fun while we do it? And it was just gold, and everybody that got involved was so positive and so up for it. And then while there was all the headliners, there's been thousands of people who have just got on with it and walked miles, run miles, cycled, done all kinds of crazy stuff, and getting messages from them saying Thursday night's the highlight of my week, or I'm really looking forward to Thursday. It was just an amazing feeling. And that's probably something you maybe don't appreciate, how the things you do impact on somebody that you might never meet, because the Hong Kong Sevens, although you probably would stand and shake everybody's hand as they left, but those things reach far, far further than I think we ever appreciate. And Doddy, you've met Doddy, and Doddy's been across to Hong Kong, so you know how easy it is to jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah, in fact, I was lucky enough I was on a Zoom call with Doddy a couple of weeks ago with Martin Murray, who is a good friend of Doddy and who sort of led the fundraising activities for the My Name's Doddy Foundation out here in Hong Kong, with an incredible annual dinner that he's been organising with a couple of mates of his before the Sevens each year, with amazing guests. I mean, we had Sir Billy Connolly. I lose track. 2 years ago.
Is that the dinner? Was it Martin that bought a shirt signed by, was it the British Lions, and then took it home, and it ended up going through the washing machine and all the signatures disappeared?
There's quite a lot of stories about Martin and shirts, or shirts at that dinner ended up in boots of cars and washing machines and all sorts. Yeah, but it raises an incredible amount of money, and Doddy's been out to it. He's been out to Hong Kong a number of times. But yeah, it was good to catch up with him, as I say, a couple of weeks ago, and he was in his usual good form, having a couple of Guinnesses.
Yeah, it's like a staple. It's just I'll have a Guinness. He cracks me up. So Robbie McRobbie from Scotland is in charge of Hong Kong Rugby Union. Let's go right back to the beginning, because I spent 4 years in Hong Kong, 4 of absolute happiest times, and met people and did things, and I've made memories that I'm never ever going to forget. But you were out there long before I was there.
Yeah, I went out to Hong Kong in 1992. So I'm the Gullen, East Lothian. In fact, my dad's still living there. I grew up in Gullen, went to school in Gullen and in Edinburgh Academy, and then went to university down in England. And then in 92, finished university. Didn't have much idea what I wanted to do, and one of my brothers was a policeman in Hong Kong. So much to his annoyance, I decided I would follow him and join up as a police. Unfortunately, when I arrived there at the police training school, which is in Aberdeen, which is quite confusing, it's in Aberdeen, Hong Kong. Lo and behold, my brother was my physical training instructor. So for 9 months, I had to call him sir and salute him, my own brother. And I've got to say, H.E., he wasn't a very nice bloke. And everybody in my squad hated me because they blamed me for my brother's brutality. So it wasn't a great start. So anyway, I lasted. I did 11 years in the police, and loved every minute of it. It was fantastic for a young man out in Hong Kong at that time. Played a lot of sport. It was just brilliant. But the problem was I was, and I know you know this story, but the problem was I was crap. I was a crap. In 11 years, I arrested one person, and he was burgling my own flat. And as it turned out, he'd been living in an empty flat underneath my flat for 2 weeks, nicking stuff. So anyway, after 11 years, I decided that I really needed to find something I was slightly better at. So I kind of ended up, my last posting in the police was as the assistant manager at the Police Officers Club. So they'd taken me off the streets anyway. They didn't let me carry a gun anymore, and I was organising kids' birthday parties and Elvis Presley fan club events. But I was pretty good at that, actually.
That was when we met. We met. I think the first time we met was when I was in the Police Officers Club. In the first year I was in Hong Kong, the British police team came over and played against a select team.
Yep.
And I was in the select team. And then the after match function, I think, was at the police club. And that was where I first met you, and you were in charge and making things happen, trying to control 30 British coppers who were on tour, plus a whole load of waifs and strays who'd made up the Police Commissioner 15, I think it was called.
That was a really, really good British police team. I remember it was an ex-Scottish international who was the coach, you remember correctly. Would that be right?
I can't remember, but I was at the bottom of a ruck, and Bruce Ward, who played in the back row for Curry, and Wardy was, the polite way to put it, was hard. And somehow or other, I ended up at the bottom of a ruck, and Wardy never often missed a chance. And he had his arm cocked, and then he realised it was me, and just went, "What the are you doing here?"
Saved by confusion.
Exactly, and it was like, oh no, he had the arm caught and didn't go for it. But those, I don't know, do those still happen in Hong Kong? Those kind of throwing people together games?
So I was going to say, it's funny you bring up the police. So 2 years ago, 2019, I was contacted. Well, it was about 2018. I was contacted by the Australian Police Rugby Club, and they said they knew that I was an ex-policeman, and they said, "Oh, we're thinking of, wouldn't it be good if there was a police rugby World Cup?"
That's right.
There's one actually. There's an armed forces one which normally takes place at the same year as the World Cup, and often in the same country as the World Cup. But they haven't had a police one before. So I said, yeah, we'd love to host it in Hong Kong. So we basically put together. It was going to be the first ever police World Cup, and you know, at its peak, we had about, I suppose, about 10 teams coming and men's and women's teams once. Anyway, of course, then the social disturbances broke out in Hong Kong, and I found myself organising the first ever police World Cup in possibly the most anti-police environment in the world. So we basically had to cancel it, but by that stage, a number of the teams they couldn't get the money back on the flights. So we had a stealth secret police World Cup, a bit like Secret Policeman's Ball, with the British men, the English men, the British women, and Australia and New Zealand men and women's teams came across. And actually, I mean, it was brilliant. It's so sad that we couldn't sort of do what we'd originally planned to do, but they all still, I think, very much enjoyed the time. We were running. It was at the time of the Japanese World Cup, so we had a fan zone up and running in Hong Kong.
That looked awesome. That looked so good.
Yeah, it's good. So they all spent a lot of time down there. So it was good, and it was lovely once you've been a police officer. I mean, I've been lucky enough to play in a number of rugby tournaments at World Police and Fire Games, which takes place every 2 years, I think it is. But there's a real this whole brotherhood of blue. It's fantastic. Everybody, you know, once you're part of the brotherhood or the sisterhood, everybody gets together and you know, enjoys sport on the field and has a few beers afterwards. Which is obviously the essence of rugby anyway. But yeah, it was good. So hopefully that can take place again next year or the next World Cup, maybe in not such a secretive manner.
I bet they'll be desperate to come back, and word will have spread. The other teams will want to be there. But your degree was in events and hospitality, wasn't it? Was it not something?
Not my first. So my first degree was history. But then I did I did sports and recreation management when I was in Hong Kong, qualification in that, which was good, and I'm glad I did that. That sort of that helped me because I was still in the police at that time, and that I think kind of helped solidify my thoughts that was the area that I wanted to get involved with. I mean, I'd always been, at school and university, I'd always been involved in organising the discos and the sort of the social events and what have you. And we made, in fact, the highlight of my university career was we made Kylie Minogue an honorary member of college. And they actually, Stockton and Waterman gave me and my pal tickets to go and meet her and watch her Birmingham NEC and meet her beforehand.
So you met Kylie Minogue?
I met Kylie Minogue, yeah.
Well, how long have we known each other? And I'm just finding that out now.
I'll send you the picture afterwards.
Oh, wonderful! Well, one of our mutual friends, who's my best mate, Adam Hay, one of his best stories ever. Can you remember C2 in Edinburgh on Lothian Road? It was a club.
Yeah.
He was in there. Jason Donovan was on stage singing, and he comes down to the front of the stage to touch everybody's hand. So everybody's got their hand up, like wanting to be touched by Jason Donovan. And Jason Donovan's going along, touching all their hands. And he got so excited that he jumped up and he thumbed Jason Donovan in the eye. He stopped singing because it's. Oh, that's one of my. I've got lots of stories about him. The time he tried to make raisins by putting grapes in the microwave, but I've got heaps of stories about him. But that's not why we're here. So,
are you going to get him on the podcast?
Well, because he's now an employee of the New Zealand Rugby Union, he's a little bit twitchy about what he's allowed to say. And when Warren Gatlin's his boss, he doesn't want to upset Warren Gatlin or Gats as he is to him now. He's the only Scotsman Warren Gatlin likes. So you then, from the police club, and one of the bits that people won't know is, are you fluent in Cantonese?
Well, I speak Cantonese to my wife. I mean, I understand lots of kind of swear words and things about you lazy git and things like that, which most of the vocabulary seems to be. But you have to learn if you're an expatriate police as well. I mean, obviously they don't recruit them anymore, but yeah, we had to learn Cantonese. So
you landed here and had to do Cantonese lessons.
Yeah, we did. Well, I think like a month full time at the training school, and then after you'd passed out, you then went back and did another 3-month full time course. So you had to pass the government exams, but not reading and writing. I had a go at learning that, but that was way beyond me.
That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, they say it's a pictorial language, A2, but it's a bit of a stretch, quite honestly. The symbol for thing you can just about make out, but the rest of it, I think they're just making it up.
Because I remember being stood next to you the first time you were speaking to me, and then just like that, you started speaking Cantonese, and I think I took a step back because I was so in awe, and I didn't know any of that stuff. I don't think I even knew you'd been a proper copper when we first met, but I remember standing with you and you just clicked straight into it, and I was just blown away. So you then get the job with the rugby union. That's a big deal that you could speak Cantonese, because a big part of what you've done is you've really energized the local community to get involved in the game.
Yeah, I think that the expat police officers in Hong Kong have always had a slightly unusual place because we can speak some Cantonese and because we tend to be quite embedded with the local culture. I mean, the first first posting I had after the training school, I was up in the New Territories, up in Fan Ling, and I was the only expat in the entire police station. So, you have to, you don't have an awful lot of choice, but to sort of assimilate to the local culture, etc. So yeah, it was definitely a help. But I was also really fortunate that I joined the union at a time when we were just starting to kind of expand, and some a lot of the guys that you were very close to, who joined the union at that time, people like Brandon Wang and Fegai, Fat Chicken.
Fegai, my boy.
It's a slight non sequitur, but as you know, one of the peculiar things about Chinese culture is the nicknames, and the nicknames tend to be very graphic descriptions of big nose, fat chicken.
Yeah. Well, that when I got introduced to Fegai, that was pretty much the first thing he told me. He said, "Fegai, fat chicken." I said, "Fat chicken." He went, "Yeah, that's what Fegai means." Oh.
So there was a great bunch of young local rugby players who had come on board at the union, who and I think the union had been very smart because they'd had a program of supporting the education of these youngsters as they came through the sort of the academy system. And at the back end of this, they felt that they wanted to give back, and quite a number of them did join the union and became very much the bedrock of the community department and the efforts that we then made. That was 2003, so yeah, very much. We'd just been through 1997. I mean, before, in the run-up to the handover, with the departure of the British military, who had been very much the backbone of rugby in Hong Kong, and also the end to recruitment of expatriate police officers, who'd been another big force in rugby, there was real concern as to whether or not rugby would survive as a game in Hong Kong. And the union, to its credit, turned its attention to local development and getting more local Chinese playing the sport. So by 2003, we were starting to benefit from that. And then, as I say, with the guys who came on board, we were able to really kick that on over the next sort of decade, up until sort of 2013, 15. There was a sustained period of growth, more and more kids getting involved at all levels of the game.
And Andy Yoon, I think, he just finished that's about 17 years, I think he's been at the union. And when you were last across here, and Andy was here as analyst, I think, for the women's squad, and came to visit me here at school, and it was just an amazing thing that a local Chinese Hong Kong kid, that the only reason he and I met was because of rugby. And then 17 years later, he's stuck in and done really, really well and gets himself a trip to Scotland. And it was one of those lovely little closing off the circle moments as he arrives here. And then I just saw he posted, I think that's him done his 17th year as an employee of the union, which is spectacular. And the union deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, it's a two-way thing. I mean, a lot of those guys have been extremely loyal and supportive for the union over the years, and even, I mean, the ones that have moved on to bigger and better things have still remained big supporters of rugby and big advocates and ambassadors for rugby in the community. So yeah, we've been very, very lucky. I mean, as I say, it's kind of what comes around goes around. The union helped them out when they were young, gave them support, and they paid that back in spades over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I love, well, how much I love Hong Kong, and still keep in touch with a whole load of those guys. And that I was in Hong Kong at a really confusing time for rugby. 2001 was when I arrived, and it still had the hangover from 97, where some of the clubs weren't really sure who they were. There weren't the expats around who necessarily wanted to commit to twice a week training and play on a Saturday, and the locals were beginning to get interested, but they weren't. It was a bit like here now with the amateurs and professionals. They weren't physically ready to compete against a lot of the expat guys who were just more experienced and physically bigger. But then gradually, a few got in, and then that was what it needed, didn't it? It needed role models, and some of those guys that the union looked after, like my club Kowloon, went from having no locals to having a team and a women's team, and all of a sudden the atmosphere and the culture of the club changed absolutely for the better. And the relationships that then formed hopefully helped a whole load more local kids, and I think the numbers you've got now with taking part in rugby are absolutely superb, aren't they?
Yeah, we actually last year we got KPMG to do a sort of actually the first real in-depth State of the Union survey, because as part of our current strategic plan, we're trying to get more data driven. So a bit like Moneyball. We're trying to base decisions less on the opinions of people in the sportsman's bar, as opposed to data driven decision making. But yeah, so we've got a really strong mini community. So boys and girls aged 4 to 11, we've got about 4,500 playing the game registered. We've got rugby in about 250 local primary schools. But that's different types of programs. Some of that's learning English through rugby, some of it's learning values through rugby. It's not all rugby school teams. Then we've got about 1,700 youth players, boys and girls. We have 80 something senior men's and women's teams that play in the Saturday League. 24 tertiary institutions, universities and colleges. So yeah, I mean it's grown a lot, and it's the majority of the players in Hong Kong are local Chinese, which is good, which is what we set out to do. There's still lots of areas that a lot of work remains, and we haven't been as successful at getting the local players through to the highest levels of, certainly on the men's side of the game, as we would have liked. And those role models that you refer to still remain massively important, the ones that are playing. The women's game is very different, and I was lucky enough to coincide a visit back to Scotland when our women's team were across in Edinburgh again 2 years ago, wasn't it? 18 months ago. And as you know, I mean, the majority of our national women are local Hong Kong Chinese. They played in the last World Cup in Ireland, and are still in the process of trying to qualify for this year's World Cup in New Zealand. So the women's game is going very well, going very, very strongly. Overall numbers are okay, they're encouraging, but like every union around the world, lots of stuff to be done, and lots of concerns as to what we're going to see on the back end of COVID, and the re-engagement process across all levels of the community is going to be absolutely critical. Getting people, re-engaged and back out on the pitch is not going to be an easy challenge.
Yeah, I'm hoping people realise either what they've missed or what they were missing anyway, and now need to get involved in something. And rugby might be it. Hong Kong's when I was there, I found that you were almost in the middle of things. It's a bit like being in Scotland, in that 4 hours you can be in 20 different countries. In Hong Kong, in 4 hours you can be in 20 different countries. And although they might not be rugby powerhouses, there's rugby in every country in Asia, and you've been to lots of them. The game seems like it's flying. Asia Rugby are working hard. I've been doing a little bit with them to try and help promote their stuff, which has been class. What's the atmosphere like around the region for rugby? Do you think the appetite's growing?
Yeah, it is. I mean, a lot of effort and a lot of focus was put into the lead up to the Japanese World Cup. The big push around, there was this project Asia 1 Million to try and get 1 million new players into rugby, and that was that target was achieved. I think that when you're chasing numbers, there's always this danger of you need to make it sustainable. You know what I mean? The big fear is you end up with 1 million rugby balls sitting in cupboards of schools around the region. And kids they've had the sort of the interest sparked by somebody dropping in and doing a workshop or a session or whatever like that, and then they don't get a chance to play again. But the good thing is there are some fantastic projects in Asia, in particular. The Child Fund, who have the Passive Back project, which was the official charity of the last World Cup. They do incredible work in a number of countries, including Cambodia, Laos, Philippines. They're in East Timor, Papua New Guinea. They're just starting now in the Pacific Islands, Fiji, and they use sport in a really strong way as a medium to try and address some of the social challenges in those countries, and to help with gender equity, female empowerment, all that good stuff. And they've had huge success, to the point where in Laos, because they were starting from scratch, really, that nobody really knew much about rugby before Child Fund got going there. So they were starting with a blank piece of paper. They focused on women, and the majority of people in Laos think that rugby is a women's sport.
Oh, really?
Boys play football and girls play
rugby. Yeah, I've seen some of that on social media, and one of the other podcast guests was saying she's been out to Laos twice, and it's just such a great thing that almost being able to start with a blank sheet, because how complicated is this bloody game now? And if you're in a tier 1 nation, it's like, right, we're changing the rules, we're going to have tackle below the waist, and we're going to have a captain's referral and all this kind of nonsense, whereas being able to present it brand new must be really refreshing and invigorating for the people delivering it, and for the people receiving it, they're hearing it for the first time, so just right, that's what it is, rather than all this mumbo jumbo that surrounds the international game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one has to remember as well. I mean, a lot of these countries, they're not even watching it on TV. You know, they might, they might have access to the internet, Facebook. They might watch a few clips, a few bits and bobs, but by and large, they don't know anything about the game. There's no preconceptions. So, I mean, that in one regard, that's pretty challenging when you start and try to get something going. But as you say, create such opportunity and potential to create the game in the image that you want it to be,
and that suits them. Rather, one of my frustrations is everybody's trying to play the way Test rugby is, whereas that's for them. Let them get on with kicking it up in the air and chasing. Let's everybody else have some fun with the ball. So Hong Kong is. I hate when people talk about their bucket list. I hate bucket lists. Just do good stuff is my sort of view on it. But whenever people say to me, "Oh, you were in Hong Kong. What's the sevens like?" It's one of the hardest things to describe, the Hong Kong Sevens. So the way I tend to go is, if you like rugby, you'll love it. If you like a party, you'll love it. If you like rugby and a party, it's like utopia. Like, to me, it's just, now when I was, and I know things have changed and I need to get away from 20 years ago almost, but when I was there, you had the Manila Tens the week before, or if you stayed in Hong Kong, you had the country of origin. Now, I loved the country of origin tournament. So in Hong Kong, because there's so many expats, all the Scots from all the clubs would then become Scotland, and all the English would become an Ireland. And New Zealand won it every year because they were rammed with all the boys that were paid to play rugby in Hong Kong at the time. But everybody else just took great pride in putting on their national jersey and playing. Then you had a bit of a rest on the Monday, but there was a dinner. Somebody was hosting a dinner, whether that was the St Andrews Society or the Australian community. Then the Tuesday was right, is everybody ready for this? Wednesday, Thursday was the Tens. Then we had the Kowloon brought in their Tens, and then Friday the Sevens starts. And by Sunday, you are on your knees but begging for more. And by Monday, like, just waving the white flag. It's a week to be savoured, endured, enjoyed, shared. Like, but did you get to enjoy it now, or is it too stressful for you?
Too stressful.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, when I first came out of Hong Kong, I had many years in the South Stand and enjoying it. As the old saying goes, you know, if at the sevens you get bored, you can always turn around and watch the rugby. Yeah. So yeah, so I have seen that side of it, obviously, but no, now I mean it's stressful in a good way. I mean it's obviously it's our busiest week of the year, as you say. I mean it's just incredible amount of activity and events that go on, and so as a CEO, you know, I mean I'm very lucky to get invited to a lot of them, and I do try and make an effort to get along to as many as I can. But yeah, it's pretty full on. Monday is always a good day. I mean, when things have gone well, you know what I mean, and people, you know, that 120,000 people have come through the gates, have had a really good time.
Yeah,
are all feeling pretty rough. But that's when, you know, we as a team, we sort of kick back, go for a bit of a lunch on the Monday, reflect on what has happened, catch up on the stories.
I was going to say, you find out everything that they didn't tell you at the time.
yeah, and often, with my obviously still having a lot of friends in the police, I do often get a phone call on the Monday morning as well from a mate saying, "Oh, we've got someone in the cells. You might want to come and get out," and things like that. So there's always stories.
It's always now. One of the bits I know you enjoy is booking some of the support acts. Now, the last time I was there was an absolute joy because you booked the Proclaimers, and the Proclaimers played to the South Stand. And being a Hibs fan from this part of the world, and them singing "Sunshine on Leith" in what is probably my second favourite place in the world after Murrayfield, being in the Hong Kong Stadium with the Proclaimers doing "Sunshine on Leith," I was sitting thinking, I think I've made it. I think this is it. Like I'm done. And then they did 500 miles, and the whole place just went whoosh. It was absolutely bonkers. But you had Shabal dressed as a caveman. Did he do 500 miles?
Yeah.
Like whose idea was that? Was that you?
No, that was actually the sponsor. That was Marriott who did that. That was a bit of genius. No, I mean I've come up with some pretty wild and wacky and some of them pretty rubbish ideas, but the Shabal one was really good, and that wasn't mine. I can't take credit for that.
But you are. Please tell me you are taking credit for the Hoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If there's an abuse of power, it's the CEO of the Hong Kong Rugby Union going, "Do you know who I really want to perform? David Hasselhoff." And everybody in the meeting, because you're the big cheese, going, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Let's get David Hasselhoff."
So I knew obviously you would be asking me about the Hoff. So there are some stories I can tell, and there's some that I can't about his time with us in Hong Kong. What I can say, if anybody wants to get a kind of an insight into what the whole thing was like, you can still find the clip on Sean Maloney is doing the commentating, and we got him to do a number of different sort of vignettes during the course of the weekend, until he had to go to hospital. But one of them was a Baywatch vignette. So he came out, the Hoff comes out in all the Baywatch gear and runs down to the South Stand. So he comes out from the drum, runs down to the South Stand with all the assembled, you know, cast and different. Yeah. So Sean Maloney's doing the commentating, and he says, "Oh, this is great. It's David Hasselhoff. I'm a big Baywatch fan. It's fantastic. The Hoff, he's here in Hong Kong and he's in front of the South Stand. How great is this going to be?" And he's singing a theme from Baywatch, and look, they're putting up three lifeguard chairs, 3 of those high chairs. Isn't this great? They're putting them up facing the South Stand. Let's have a look and see who's getting in those. Oh, the first one. Oh, that's like a Pamela Anderson lookalike. Yeah, it's a blonde girl in the Baywatch outfit. Yeah, that's great. Who's getting into the second chair? Oh, it's a big fat bloke. It's a big fat bloke dressed as a lifeguard. That's a bit weird, but oh well, you know. And he says, I've seen it all now. Anyway, I'm kind of down there, sort of soaking up the atmosphere. And at that point, a drunk spectator from the South Stand, dressed as Pamela Anderson, jumps over the fence and makes a run for the Hoff. And there's only me between the Hoff and the drunk.
It was the greatest tackle of the whole weekend.
It's the greatest tackle of my entire rugby career.
The thing is, you got pelters for it, because after that it was, I've never seen him make a tackle before. Well done, Robbie. Good technique. Cheek to cheek, Robbie. It was relentless. It was everybody that knew you was putting a comment on. Gold. But
I've got to say that the Hoff was brilliant. He was fantastic fun. He's a rugby fan. I don't know whether
he's Welsh. His wife's Welsh, isn't
partner,
he?
Yeah, I think now wife. Partner, she came out with him. She's a lovely girl. Yeah, she was a big Welsh fan. So since then, he's been to. I know he's been to a couple of Welsh matches. He went to the LA Sevens, I think, or the Vancouver Sevens. So he knows his rugby. Good guy. He did give one of the worst renditions on Delilah I've ever heard. The problem was he didn't really know the words. So there was somebody telling him the words in his ear, and he was then singing it, but he was slightly behind the beat of the music.
The thing is though, when you're the Hoff, everybody, like, it didn't matter. It just made it even better that it was terrible. It just made it even better, and he was such. When the Hoff came, I said to my mate Robbie's organised that.
Well, it was. I've got to say, I mean, it was pretty good, and it was more the year before, 2 years before, when I'd organised the halftime show was Kung Fu Rugby, which again you can still find clips of it on the internet. This is based on there's a really successful, very very successful Hong Kong film called Shaolin Soccer, which is about a group of monks who form a football team and who basically win the World Cup by using monk-like skills. So I thought, well, that's good. We'll do the same thing with rugby. So we found the female. This is absolutely true story. This lady was a famous kung fu actress in Hong Kong many years ago. The female Jackie Chan. So she now has a kung fu stunt school in China. So we got in touch and we put together this plan, and we rigged the stadium. So we put wires across the stadium so we could have players in harnesses so it looked like they're flying and all this sort of stuff. However, the thing was, so there's me and Sam Pinder, who's the ex-Glasgow Scottish player. So Sam, at the time, me and Sam were running the Sevens. Sam now runs the Sevens and does a far better job than I ever did. But at the time, so he and I were working on this project together. So we went up to this kung fu school, and Sam tried to teach them rugby, and he did not have a clue. Didn't have a clue. So when it came to actually rehearsing the real thing, so I will always remember. So one of the things was we put a ball on a bungee rope. So the idea was that they would pass the ball along the line, along the pitch, but it was on a bungee, so it was like traveling at a huge rate of knots to make it look like they were like using kung fu skills. But the problem was they couldn't catch. The ball was whooshing on this bungee, smacking them in the head, knocking them over. And eventually, we basically had to give up because they were doing themselves a serious injury. They couldn't. And it's like whiplash from the ball. So anyway, it kind of we got away with it just about. We were actually rehearsing it. It was on the Sunday. It was a halftime show on the Sunday, and on the Saturday after everybody went home, we were still rehearsing it at 2:00 in the morning on the pitch. And it wasn't looking great on the day. It kind of the finale the finale was David Campese, who is another great bloke.
Yeah.
Who comes at Sevens every year. Big fan of Sevens. Anyway, David agreed. So Campo, the final act was Campo ran on the pitch and picked the ball and stole the ball and ran off. And so it was all good fun in the end. But a few sleepless nights with that. I wouldn't do it again.
just genius. I said in the intro, Hong Kong for me was a land opportunity. You gave me some of those, and one of the ones that still kind of tickles me was you got me to be a sighting officer for the Sevens. And I was like, what does it mean? But pretty much I got a pass, and if anybody got red carded, I had to host a sighting meeting to work out what the ban was going to be. And I'm right, okay, so I'm there swanning around with my Hong Kong Rugby Union t-shirt on, and people going, what are you doing here? Is it sighting officer, behave yourself, sighting officer? And then the only person that got a red card the whole weekend was a Japanese guy. And you said, right, I'll do this one so you can see how it goes, and then it's up to you. But it was the only one the whole weekend. And there's me and you and this Japanese guy, and he just had the big frown on and the big sweaty black like this, just yeah. And just I'd obviously been told, like, you've disrespected, do as you're told, just accept it, and everything going through the translator, and you pretty much saying, you've been a naughty boy, haven't you? I think he got banned for the group matches, and then he was back in, and then that was it. So I had the whole weekend to myself, just swan around. Yeah, sighting officer. It was brilliant.
It's an important job.
It was an important job. The first 3 years I was there, England won the Sevens every year. And I was like, this is just not how it's supposed to be. And then the fourth year I was there was the World Cup Sevens. And it was, I think it was Fiji All Blacks final with Serevi as kind of his last hurrah in 2005. And that's a bit like, you know, the All Blacks are the team. Brazil in football are the romantic best team. To be there with Fiji winning the World Cup and Serevi playing was like Hong Kong, like you're saying, turn around and watch the rugby. There are points in the Hong Kong Sevens weekend where I think you just have to stand and look around and go, this is unreal. This is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, with Sally Serevi has obviously been he's been a really important part of the development of Sevens over the years, but he's been a huge part of Hong Kong, and he's always very, very gracious in whenever he's asked. He always says, if there was no Hong Kong Sevens, there'd be no Serevi. And again, he comes back every year, and he's been back coaching various teams. He was coaching Russia last time, but he always comes back. And again, this is a true story. In fact, I was just in touch with him last week. Made some face masks for Hong Kong Rugby Union, so he wanted some of those for the family. So we just sort of sent those across. So we keep in touch with him. But one of his daughters came across. So this must be again last time we had the Sevens 2 years ago. And it was early in the morning, and we were sitting in the stand looking out. So we were sitting in the Union box. And his daughter she's in the US Air Force. Very, very nice girl. We're chatting away, and I was asking about the family, and I said, does your mum like rugby? And she said, oh, she loves rugby. I said, oh, does she ever come to the tournament? She says she comes every year. I said, oh, well, where is she? Because we'd offered the family VIP tickets like she had to come in the box. And she said, she's over there. And she pointed. And you'll remember, the other end from the south stand, in the north stand, there's always a group of Fijians wearing blue wigs. And she said, she's with them. Really? She said, yeah. She comes every year. There's like a group of Fijian. They're not all Fijians, but they don't all necessarily live in Fiji. But they all kind of meet up at the tournaments around the world, like they're on the series. And she said, do you not want to bring her in? No, she's quite happy over there. She's with her mates.
That's class. That is absolute class. The Fijian jersey behind me here, that's because Leone Nakarawa and Big Bill Mata, that Edinburgh and Glasgow. When the cyclone hit Fiji a few years ago, my mate Rupeni that I coached with, Fijian guy in the army here, we organised a fundraiser and we raised enough money to buy tables and chairs for a school in Fiji, Roop's old school in Fiji. So they hosted this Olympic celebration night for Bill and Leonie in the barracks across the road here. And I got invited to go along. And it was just another one of those moments where I was looking around. You've got Nicky Goneva, who at the time was playing on the wing for Newcastle. You got Leonie and Bill and Nico Matawalu and Brian Albanese. Like, just everybody just arrived at this, and the fabulous Fijian food, sitting on the Hessian mats on the floor, drinking kava with the Fijian boys, and just like unreal moment. Like, I'm very lucky to have been part of that. But rugby, the Fijians and sevens, and the Fijians in rugby just adds so much. And those fans, you see them sometimes in Vancouver and they just make noise and they just love it, don't they? And they're such a great part of it. So Robbie, time's ticking as usual, and I could talk to you all day and all night because I've not seen you for ages. So every guest, I'm asking at the end to finish a sentence. So I'm going to ask you to finish the sentence. Robbie McRobbie, happiness is
a pint of Belhaven in the White Stag with John Bruce listening to H's podcast.
Oh, I like what you did there. Now, for everybody who's listening at home who don't know who John the Bruce is, John the Bruce is a unique individual who is a very good friend of Robbie and I. And Robbie sent me a message the other night to say, just had a pint with John the Bruce and I feel, what was it you said? Tired,
emotional, and confused.
Tired, emotional. That beautifully sums up a night with John the Bruce. Tired, emotional, and slightly confused. Robbie McRobbie, an absolute joy. I'm so glad you agreed to come on. I've had a brilliant chat, and I hope everybody's going to enjoy listening to it. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, H. Take care.
Brilliant. Well, I think you can probably hear how much I've enjoyed that. Yes, he's my mate. Yes, that's why he was invited on. But he's the CEO of the Hong Kong Rugby Union, who put on the best sevens tournament every year without fail. Don't even attempt to argue that point. That is the case. Hong Kong is the best. If you get the chance, go. Don't make a bucket list. Just go, and you'll want to go back. Hong Kong was a very special place for me. I spent 4 years there. I've been back 3 times, I think, since I left in 2005. And every time I go back, it feels a bit more like home. And it's because of people like the great man, Robbie McRobbie. I feel very, very honoured that he came on here, and I love having him as my mate. I hope you enjoyed this. Look forward to catching up with you in future podcasts. You can listen to this on Apple, Spotify, and Acast. It's also available on YouTube and on social media. But for now, my name is Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg Shaped, and this was the Happiness Is podcast. Thank you very much, and I look forward to listening to you and talking to you again. Bye-bye.